Today is Module 4, Lesson 29. We're going to continue looking at multi-step problems. This lesson is very similar to other lessons and modules in general in the sense that first we're going to look at it with models and pictures so that we see what it means. Using the tape diagram so we understand what it means. Once we see what it is and we see what it means, then we'll be able to move on to solving it in a more efficient, quicker manner. But first we're going to learn how to think about it, then we're going to learn how to solve it. So have patience through the first exercise. Two steps were the equation part of it. Okay? The models were to help us set up the first step equation. All right. The school librarian, Mr. Marker, knows the library has 1,400 books, but wants to reorganize how the books are displayed on the shelves. Mr. Marker needs to know how many fiction, nonfiction, and resource books are in the library. He knows that the library has 4 times as many fiction books as resource books, and half as many nonfiction books as fiction books. If these are the only types of books in the library, how many of each type of book are in the library? First, let's try words, lots of words. Let's simplify this so we're not intimidated by these word problems. What is the gist? What do we want to know? What do we want to know? All right, each type of book. Well, what are the different types of books? We have this is going to be the Mrs. Lebowski Shoob show. Okay, so the 3 types of books. All right, well, the first sentence has some important information. The library has 1,400 books. Now we know that we have half as many nonfiction books as fiction books. And we also know that we have 4 times as many fiction as resource books. So we have to know how many resource books that we have so we can figure out how many fiction. Once we know the fiction, then we can figure out the nonfiction. So really, if we take a look at these extra sentences, I don't care who Mr. Marker is. We need to know, that's part of our question. Okay? Again, reorganizing, I don't care what you're doing with your books. So once we cut through the chase, look at the yellow, the blue, and the pink. That's what we really need to know. Okay? So don't be intimidated. I find that they just put in extra words sometimes to check, do you really understand what we're looking for? All right, now the first step, they're asking us to draw a tape diagram to represent the total number of books in the library. So what is the total number of books in the library? Our total. So our tape diagram is going to be large because that's our total. What is it? Yep. That's that. Step 1 done. That's our tape diagram for the total number of books in the library. Now, he knows that the library has 4 times as many fiction books as resource books. What do we need to know to be ordered to solve that? Where do I have to start with? What do I have to know first? Resource books. The number of resource books. So let's draw a tape diagram. So there, that's how many resource books I have. I have 4 times as many fiction books. So let's draw a tape diagram for how many fiction books. I'm going to take my resource books. I have 4 times as many. Okay? So what variable should we keep using? Because what are we basing it on? What's our smallest unit? the resource books. So I could label all of these with R's if I wanted. So we'll use the variable R. Whoops. So what is the relationship between the resource books and the fiction books algebraically? So I know that my resource books algebraically are R. This table has been very distractive and disruptive. Please pay attention and stay with us. So the resource books are R. How can I write my fiction books algebraically? How can I write my fiction books? Look at the tape diagram. If I have 4 times as many resource books, what's my answer? Fiction books. I want to say fiction books algebraically. No, because that would mean R times R times R. I have R plus R plus R plus R. How many R's do I have? 4. So I have 4 R's. 4 times R. I have R 4 times. Now that I know how many fiction books I have, let's figure out how many nonfiction. So I'm going to go back. How many R's do I have for fiction books? Everybody? 4. So if I have half as many, what do I have? 2. You guys are so smart. So here's my tape diagram for nonfiction. So now let's skip down. What is the number of nonfiction books in the library algebraically? Algebraically. How can I represent this algebraically? How am I going to write that algebraically? 2R. Fabulous. Good job. So far, so good? Anybody want to know where a box came from, or a letter, or a number? Because we know that it equals 4 R's. The purpose is we want to stay with the same variable. Because if we can keep the same variable, we'll be able to simplify the problem. And I'll show you why. If you don't mind, I'm going to answer your question in a minute or two. It's a good question. And you'll see why in a minute. Not see why. I'm not throwing in another variable. I'm only working on a couple hours sleep. I'm not on my A game today. Alright, so now let's combine our tape diagrams to see if we can solve it. Alright, I know that my total is 1,400. So draw your big tape diagram for 1,400. Now, I know that if I combine my resource, my fiction, and my nonfiction, it has to equal the total number of books, right? So here are my resource books. Here are my four resource books, which equals fiction. And here's my 2R, which is my nonfiction. So we were able to match them up. Anybody have a question? So now, see, if we had different variables, it's going to get confusing. And you'll see even more in a minute.
So basically, your books.
Well, let's hold on to that for one more second. Write an equation first that represents this whole tape diagram. So give me an in-between step from what you said. They're going to say, what? Where did he get that from? I'm not even saying what you said because I don't want it to go on the recording. Give me an in-between step. Somebody give me an equation. What do we see here? What equals what? I'm going to skip you for a second, unless somebody else join the show.
R plus 4R plus 2R.
Anybody have a question on where one of those numbers came from? Why we added, why it equaled that? Okay, now Caitlin, here we come up to answer your question. I'm going to call on you now. What did you want to say? What did you say before?
I said that if you add all those up, it would be 7R, which would equal 1,000.
We can combine these like terms. I can simplify this using less expressions. How many R's are there? I sound like a pirate. How many R's are there? Told you, a couple hours sleep. Not my best material today. Sorry. How many R's all together? I have an R here, 4 of them here, 2 of them there. So how many all together do I have? 7. You told me how many terms there are. Okay, now, period 6, if you're listening to this at home, this is where period 6 almost gave me agita. A lot of agita. Hopefully, you'll be my antacid. So, how am I going to solve that algebraically to find the value of r? And I want you to do it on your paper and make me happy. Because we're happy. Okay, so let's see. Most of you did this correctly. We want to know only the value of the r. 3, 2, 1. We only want to know the value of the r. We want to know the identity of the r. So right now it's 7 times r. I don't want to know 7 r's. I just want to know r. So, what is the identity property rule? 7 times r. How do I get rid of the times 7? Divide by 7. So 7 times r divided by 7. Okay. Divided by, are you with me? We're fixing your mistake right now. Equals 140 divided by 7. Because whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other side of the equation to keep the scale balanced. The reason that we chose the 7 is because the 7 is the coefficient that's with the r. The 7 is what I want to get rid of. If I divide both sides by r, the other side leaves me with 1,400 divided by r. I still don't know what r equals. Because we're not dividing 7. We want to divide 1,400 by 7. When you do that division, r equals 200. So now, r equals 200. Yay! What does it mean? You're going to add this to the side before you go down to the bottom question. What does that mean? What does that represent? What does the r mean? What is the r? The valuable r, the variable, that's the word I'm looking for, the value of the variable r, what is it? Thank you. Actually, I should have written, and I probably spelled books correctly. That's why I'm not the ELA teacher. Oh, whoops. There, I are the ELA teacher. Wait, that doesn't make sense either. Okay, so moving right along. That's another good song, but I'm not going to start singing again. Yes, ma'am. Okay, because I know that the total number of books is made up of fiction, nonfiction, and resource. Are you okay with me on that part? So if I add my fiction, my nonfiction, and my resource, it'll equal my total. So that's what I did here. I added my resource books to my fiction books to my nonfiction books, and I knew that they all equaled 1,400. So I added them up.
How do you know right away that it was 4 R's?
Because it told us here where I highlighted that we have 4 times as many fiction books as resource books, okay? So now that I know R equals 200, gentlemen, what was my algebraic equation for fiction books? What was it? 4R. And I know that R is 200, so I multiply them together to get 800. slide out and take the pass. So what is my algebraic expression for nonfiction? So R is 200. We found that out using the tape diagram and algebraic equation. So nonfiction is 400. Fiction is 800. And I should check them by adding those three together. What was my resource? 200. Fiction was 800. Nonfiction was 400. And if I add them together, it equals 1,400. So it checked. Yes. Because the equation was 4R, because they told us in the beginning we had 4 times as many resource. So 4 times R. I replaced R with 200 because we knew that R equaled 200. Did that answer your question? You sure? Okay. Okay. That was a lot of work. Easy. We could totally do it, but there's got to be an easier way. And this is where we're going to focus our lesson, and I'm going to start going a little quickly because we're running out of time. So now, we know that our fiction, well, we knew our resource was R. Our fiction was 4 times as many resources, and then our nonfiction was half as many fiction. And so my total number of books was 7R. But since they all have R in common, I'm going to pull out that R. I'm going to factor it out. So 4, 2, 1, 7. These are like our ratio tables we did way back in the beginning of the year. But are there a total of 7 books in the library? No. There's a total of 1,400 books in the library. I should have made this line darker. So I'm going to have to do a little guessing, checking to figure out how to get from 7 to 1,400. Well, I see a 7 and I see a 14. So what can I do? 7 times, so let's do 7 times 2. And that gives me 14. So that times 2 is 2, times 2 is 4. I'm just going to kind of guess and check how to fill in my table. I'm going to use the same rule all the way across. We did tables earlier in the year. We did this with our ratios. Now, how do I get from 14 to 1,400? Right, so now I'm going to do that all the way across. So 200, 400, 800. Isn't that the same answers we just had?
Yeah.
But we did it in a table. Same answers. We could have filled in this table a little differently to get from row 1 to row 4. Let's try another one. I'm going to skip this because that's our check. I want to do one more practice. So turn to number 1 of the exercises. Indian Ridge Middle School wanted to add a new school sport. So they surveyed the students to determine which sport is most popular. Students were able to choose between soccer, football, lacrosse, or swimming. The same number of students chose lacrosse and swimming. So we know that lacrosse and swimming are going to be equal. So actually, that's one of my details. So I'm going to highlight that. Same number of lacrosse and swimming. The number of students who chose soccer was double the number of students who chose lacrosse. The ones who chose football was triple the number of swimming. So if 343 students completed the survey, so I know 343 is my total. That's how many kids completed the survey. Oh, sorry. Now I have to figure out how to fill in my soccer, my football, my lacrosse, and swimming. What can I start with? Well, soccer is double lacrosse. Lacrosse and swimming are equal. Football is triple swimming, so it looks like I should start with what? Since lacrosse was double the amount of soccer, let's start with soccer. So soccer is going to be my 1. I'm sorry, no. Soccer was double who chose lacrosse. So if lacrosse was 1, soccer was double that. I also know that lacrosse and swimming are the same. Football is triple swimming. So what is football going to be? 3, because football is triple swimming. So what's my total? 2, 5, 6, 7. So now I'm going to use guess and check to get from 7 to 434. Let's pick a big number. What do you want to try to multiply it by? If it's easier to do this algebraically, hold on. 7 sports equals 434. That gives you an idea of what S is going to be, and that's what you have to multiply it by.